It's not 20%.
Right. I thought Mark was
I'll call the meeting to order. This is the March 25th, 2014 meeting of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. The first item on our agenda are the meeting minutes from March 11th, 2014. I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi, second by Commissioner Jacobson. Everybody have a chance to take a look at those? Any comments, changes, corrections? No? I'm sorry? You are sitting in. Yes, everyone's on. Everyone here is on. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Should we clarify who's sitting in for who? Do we need
They're
to?
both sitting at the moment. It's
Right.
just if another member shows up, Meg will be on.
Okay.
Mark will be on.
Meg will be on, Mark will be off.
Meg would be what, not on?
Right.
Okay.
Both on for now. We'll worry about that when time comes.
All right. Very good. So the motion to approve passed unanimously. Next item on our agenda is 537 Reed Street. Request of Attorney John Fallon for a 90-day extension for recording a final subdivision map. First extension request.
This was a two-lot subdivision approved in January. This is the first request for a 90-day extension to record the final subdivision.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion approved by Commissioner Jacobson.
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Calabrese. Any comments, questions? No? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Item passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the outdoor dining inventory, the annual review for recertification of outdoor dining.
The weather notwithstanding, it is actually spring, and hence the time to review our roster of outdoor dining establishments for their annual recertification. We've done this now for several years rather than relying on independent requests to them all collectively. The purpose here is to, if there's been any issues that you're aware of or want to bring to our attention, or any reason why any of these should not be recertified, this is the forum to consider that. We don't have any glaring issues with any of these folks. Like any other businesses, from time to time, we've had the occasional sign issue, which we've addressed, but there are none on this list that we are recommending not to be, that's a poorly phrased sentence. We're recommending that the entirety of the list be recertified for the upcoming season, which the last time the commission did this, made a motion to extend the season. Previously, it was from May 1 through the end of October. There was a request last time, and the commission agreed to allow that beginning in April. Obviously, it's kind of self-regulating with the weather, but to allow them that opportunity should the weather improve, the season being April 1 through the end of October.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
We need a motion first to open up for discussion.
So moved.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Francis.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Barrett. Questions? Yes, Commissioner Corcoran.
Why do we need a season at all? Doesn't the weather self-regulate?
It does, but there are, there's a lot of technological advances, I should say, that people can employ to extend and extend and extend with gas heaters, fire pits, and the like.
Enclosures.
For the most part, a lot of these have variances. We've adjusted our own regulations for seasonality, and typically what the restaurateurs have told us is it doesn't necessarily increase the volume of their business seasonally. It just gives folks an opportunity to sit outside rather than inside. It doesn't necessarily increase the number of folks that they serve. But if you start getting into the colder seasons, I think that might change. But that's up to this commission ultimately.
Anyone else?
motion to start at April 1st?
So the motion on the table is to approve the entire list for the season April 1 through October 31. Yes?
Yeah,
Commissioner
I would say, I would definitely support the motion. And we've had this in place for a while. I think we extended it a month a few years ago based upon, I think it used to be October 1st.
Correct.
I mean, I think it works pretty well. You know, you don't want these up year round, especially, you know, with weather, so, and everybody playing by the same rules. We used to recertify these one at a time, or as they came, now we've got like one list, and we look at its entirety, so, I think it's good. I think this has been a very beneficial thing for the town of Fairfield to have you know, a vibrant outdoor dining community and so much available to people. So I'd be inclined to support this as long as we have no issues with any of the properties in question.
So I had one question about Geronimo. Yeah, they just, new owners, I don't know if new owners, new business. Where exactly is their outdoor dining? Is it in the
It's a very
front of
small
it?
patio space in front. If you're going along the walkway, right before you get to the entrance, there's a very small area on the,
Yeah.
about
So
one table in depth along the front of their.
They're going to keep that, and then I just
Right.
haven't seen it because it was just rebuilt,
Right,
you know,
right.
this winter.
There's a little pergola over the top of it.
Mhm.
It's very narrow. It's not a large space.
Right.
Their redesign actually allows, I believe, the doors to kind of open up the front of their,
I see.
kind of like a lot of restaurants do now. So even if you're
Like Quattro
inside,
Five.
it kind of feels like you're outside by opening up the, you know, a lot of the new doors, and, you know, the accordion doors, if you will, they're glass, but they can fold back to kind of open up the whole wall.
Right.
To give it more of an open feel.
Okay, anyone else? Commissioner Francis?
Do they get it? 2-year certification, is that why some of them are down for 1 year and some of them are for no?
That's a good question. That's, as they were, if you look at the dates of some of those, you know, there's some of the older applications. What we've done is kind of move to a unified recertification process to do it on an annual basis for everybody, so everybody's playing under the same rules.
So that was
we
the
take it
first
upon
one.
ourselves to do the recertification because relying on them to apply for recertification was a very mixed bag, so we've kind of.
Yes, Commissioner Les.
Question on Barcelona. They close the back room to the restaurant and then open up the patio, is that what they do?
That was, yes, that was one of the conditions of their ZBA variance that they got, that when the patio is in progress, they're not supposed to be using their back room.
So the parking is based on 32 seats of outside dining? It says,
Right.
you got like a...
Yes. That goes back to prior, before it was even Barcelona, I can't recall the name of the establishment. It was maybe two restaurants prior to that. That was the original concept, and that was, I probably should update that, but that was back when the regs relied on a seat count versus a patron floor area. That goes back quite a bit. Goes back to '94, which predates Barcelona. I forget,
Right.
you know, with several other restaurants. That's an old footnote that I should probably update, because we don't longer go by the table and chair count, it's patron floor area only.
So we're just going by the square footage of the floor?
Right, right.
I know, at night. At night, that parking lot is crazy. You know, see that they, I don't know if anybody's been there on a Friday or Saturday night where Black Rock Turnpike looks up there. At the parking with the hotel, but, and, I mean, and they have like some sort of valet that puts the cars right on the street up there, and then people are now parking across the street at the garden center up there as well too, so it's kind of crazy up there, so, I don't even know how many spots they're allowed compared to with the hotel that's up there now too, so that's the reason I'm asking.
Okay.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? No? We ready to vote? Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? No, the item carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is closed executive session for discussion of pending litigation regarding 144 Tuller Road. Have a
Move to the executive session.
motion by Commissioner Jacobson,
I'll second it.
second by Commissioner Calabrese. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, abstentions? We're in closed executive session. So at last closed executive session, we requested that the town attorney solicit a formal proposal from the plaintiffs in the Tuller Road matter to submit a formal proposal to resolve the litigation. During this closed executive session, that was presented to us for our consideration. And we now should move to vote as to whether to authorize the town attorney to effect the settlement on the terms of the proposal that we considered in closed executive session. Does anyone have a
I
motion?
make a motion to approve the stipulation proposed by the town attorney.
Motion by Commissioner Alessi,
Second.
second by Commissioner Jacobson. Any discussion on the item?
May I be heard before you vote, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
State Lester, Town Attorney.
Oh,
Yeah.
why don't you take the, is it long enough? Can you walk it over?
He can sit at the table.
No, no.
Just for the record, there's been a stipulation for judgment that was presented to the commission, and I would suggest that that be made, a copy be made part of the record in this case, and that's what you're going to be voting on. I would also indicate that your motion should provide that the appropriate schedules will be attached by Mr. Wendt. It's my understanding they've already been drawn up, and they contain your conditions that the commission is going to impose on the settlement. So I would just suggest that that be made part of the motion also. And then, however you vote, if you vote to approve it, that will all be one package that I can then present to the court for approval. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, so with some comments from the town attorney, Commissioner Alessi, do you adopt his suggestions for amendment to the motion?
Yes, I do.
And Commissioner Jacobson, do you second that?
Yes,
All
I
right.
do.
Any further discussion, questions, or comments? I'd just like to reiterate for the record that no voting was conducted during closed executive session on this item. Anyone? Are we ready to vote? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All in favor except Commissioner Calabrese, who's voting no. Any abstentions? The item passes. Well, you can do the math. Okay. The next item on our agenda is one item for compliance, 102 Kings Highway. Compliance application of John DeTullio for a new wall sign in a designed commercial district.
Okay, 102 Kings Highway is a piece of property. It's on the triangular piece of land that runs kind of between Villa Avenue and the Triangle, you know, when Midas Muffler meets, Tufts Hill meets Kings Highway. The frontage that you have there, and I've got a color picture, is an office. It's a house, an old house converted to an office. It's next door to the old theater building that Lewin Plumbing uses for its warehouse. It's going to be an insurance office. We're looking for a illuminated box sign on the Kings Highway frontage. This site has parking lot to the rear that has access off of Tufts Hill Road. They're only proposing this one wall sign. There is they are considering a ground sign on the back side that is likely going to be subject to the zoning board's appeals application, but it's not, I just say that for disclosure, it's not part of this application. So what's before you is this single wall sign facing Kings Highway. It complies in all respect with our regulations.
Complies in all respects?
Yes.
Any motions?
I have this is black and white, it's basically a red, a dark red, prime white illuminated letters. That's what your copy is.
Does it sign, it means regulations as far as total square footage of the sign
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, it's 47 square feet in total. It's 2 feet 3 inches by 21. They get either 70, the lesser of 72 square feet or 20% of the area of the wall.
There's no address on the sign.
Right.
No, it's not, it's only required on ground signs, on pole signs.
Oh, because I thought when we did that sign on the post road that we had a concern there was no number.
Well,
Well, that
Yeah.
was another
It's
district.
required if it's a ground or pole sign, it's part of our regs, that the number be on there.
Oh, but it's not required for this?
Not on a wall sign, no.
Oh, all right.
we have,
Yeah, the bill.
yeah, you're talking about the sign that was in downtown Fairfield.
Yes.
Yeah, on
That's
the
right, they
post
have
road.
different regs, right? Because it's
Yeah,
a,
I think the concern there was some ambiguity, that there was a,
Real estate agent.
yeah, second
Oh,
floor.
you're talking about the awning on the...
oh,
Yeah.
yes, that's
Yeah.
right. I remember, we had more than one business.
Right, right, so there was some concern of confusion, I
Yes,
guess.
I remember that.
That's, okay. Still don't have a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Calabrese,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Jacobson. Any other
Every
discussion?
one,
Yep.
the sign is only supposed to be illuminated though when the business is open, isn't that right?
No, the regs stipulate that only the copy can illuminate, the background has to be opaque. We don't have any kind of timing requirements as to when the sign can or cannot be illuminated.
Okay.
Commissioner Francis?
I feel that it looks very large for the building,
So do I.
but I see how you do it, because you measure 27 by 28, and it's got the attic,
front,
whatever
right,
you want
yeah.
to call it. I don't know, I mean, I guess you can't say much if it conforms, but it's awfully big.
Any other discussion? No? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The item passes unanimously. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing. We'll just take a few minutes recess to reconfigure the microphones. Okay, great. Call the meeting back to order. This is a public hearing portion of our meeting. We have 3 items on the agenda. First is Chester Place, the second is zoning regulation amendment, third is 5151 Park Avenue. For the members of the public that are here, the way this works is the applicant states that their presentation, members of the public are given an opportunity to be heard, and the applicant has an opportunity for a rebuttal, and that then closes the public hearing on each item, and we go in order. So the first item is Chester Place, a petition for residents to have Chester Place declared a scenic road.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. My name is Jim Bohan. I live on 51 Station Street in Southport, steps from Chester Place. Let me say a few words, just a few words about this very short but very absolutely gorgeous road. Chester Place is a precious 1 block long, 600-foot long, 17-foot wide road bordered by mature trees, one of the few remaining old stone walls in the village, and ivy-covered brick walls with weathered wooden garden gates. I mean, this is like something out of a, who's that gardener? Beatrice Potter story. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. It forms part of the gateway to the village, standing between Southport Railroad Station and Scenic Road Station Street on one side, and the Main Street and the harbor on the other. It's a 1 block length between them. it's part of the beautiful corridor to the harbor, the corridor from the railroad station. People take the train out from New York, get off at Southport, walk down this corridor to Southport Main Street and the harbor. One of the jewels of the East Coast. And I think one just has to stand there on Chester Place, as I did yesterday at 3 o'clock, when the Congregational Church bell tolls and the Trinity Carillon rings, to realize this is a very, very special place in need of protection and preservation. And that's the intent of the Town Scenic Road statute, and that's why I'm here. So I thank you very much for your consideration, and thanks to the Town Planning and Zoning staff and the engineering staff, Jim and Joe Demonchik and Dolores were very helpful, and the engineering office, Joe Chismadia and Chris Rogers were very helpful, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public that wish to be heard on this item? Yes. We just ask you to state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jenny Murphy. My husband and I live at 104 Main Street in Southport, so we're on the corner of Main Street and Chester Place. And just briefly, first of all, thank you so much for your thoughtful consideration of the application. We appreciate it. And we appreciate very much Jim filing the application, so thank you. I just wanted to say that, as Jim did, this is a very, very unique little block. It is one of only 2 blocks in the village that don't have sidewalks, so that's unusual. It has a rural quality to it. And I think when I looked up the definition of scenic in the dictionary, it said affording pleasing views of natural features. So what are the natural features on this street that make it unique? First of all, it has a stone wall that runs on the south side of the street from Pequot Avenue almost to Main Street. So almost the entire 600-foot-long south side of the street is a stone wall, and the last part is a lovely iron fence that is historic in front of the Brophy's house. So there's the stone wall, which is beautiful. There's no sidewalks, and there are lovely, lovely old trees. So the whole quality of it is pastoral. The village is the village. It's very city-like, small city-like, and this is different. And Willow Street is the other street that doesn't have sidewalks, just as. So that's all I wanted to say, but thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Oh.
I have a question for Mr. Baldwin.
Well, hold on a minute, I'll see if you can come back up. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to be heard on this item? Yes, sir.
My name is Peter Ventriglia. I'm one of the 2 residents that have a street number on Chester Place. We're number 60, and John and Irene Santa are number 33. And I just want to build on what Jenny and Jim have said, that there aren't many streets like this left, and it would be great to preserve it the way it is. And it's a street that people walk a lot. It's a great dog walking street. It just is has a great community feeling to it. So we really appreciate your consideration. I know you have more important matters to consider tonight, but thank you for considering ours.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to be heard on this item? No? Mr. Bowen, you probably don't need rebuttal, but we do have a member of the commission that has a question, so if you wouldn't mind coming up for rebuttal.
I think your neighbor just answered my question. I just wanted to know which neighbors actually had street addresses, and I'm trying to match the names to the petition. Is everybody that actually lives or abuts Chester Place, regardless of whether they have address, on this petition for the scenic road?
On the map, and 72% of them I think out of the 1,000 total, or 1,100 total square feet, or linear feet of ownership, we have, I think, 900. The two people who have not signed are people who are out of town, like the Bucks, and Mrs. Marcantonio was in Florida.
Oh, okay, okay, they haven't, I actually saw their names, so I was, okay, I see their signature's not there, but their name is on the petition. Okay.
Yes.
So two people haven't signed, but you've
Right.
got 900 out of...
Right, 900 out of 1,100.
Okay.
Are they aware of this?
Oh, yeah, our,
did mail them a copy of the petition and invited them to sign.
I need you to, why don't you whisper into Mr. Bowen's ear, and he can
Jen-
make the representation?
Jen Murphy is our able quartermaster, and she communicated this action to every property owner.
Okay, very good,
No surprises.
very good.
We don't like surprises.
Any other questions? No? All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Bowen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll close the hearing. Next item on our agenda is zoning regulation amendment, application of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission to amend sections 12.4.18 and 13.14.4.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For the record, my name is Jim Wentz. I'm your Assistant Planning Director. There are three exhibits coming around for you, and I'm going to start just by reading the very first paragraph. This commission on May 3rd of 2011 adopted an amendment to our Plan of Conservation and Development, specifically regarding the Commerce Drive train station area. And I just want to read for the record this first overview paragraph. The construction of Fairfield's third train station near the intersection of Black Rock Turnpike and Commerce Drive will lay the foundation for a new walkable, mixed-use, and transit-oriented neighborhood. This district has seen greater transformation over the decades than most areas of town as a railroad-oriented industrial zone transitioned to a commercial, office, industrial-oriented around new highway interchanges. A commuter rail station will be the impetus for the next transformation. Demand for housing, office, retail, and amenities near the station will drive amendments to the town's zoning to enable the land uses for which there is a market in this area. New mixed-use, transit-oriented zoning will enable this district to evolve over time without allowing land uses that will be regional draws or those that will lead to significant traffic increases. As redevelopment occurs, site plans and development designs will work towards a common goal of balancing the transportation system in the southeast portion of town to encourage walking, bicycling, and transit use. So that planning effort in 2011 yielded an amendment to our zoning regulations, which is embodied in section 13 of our regulations, which is the second exhibit that I gave you. And that was also adopted in May of 2011. So why are we here this evening? We have found what we believe to be an error and an omission in those regulations. The error, we believe, stems from an earlier draft of our proposed Section 13, which was originally entitled Transit-Oriented Design Overlay District. In subsequent drafts, we decided to have a Commerce Drive Area Design District, which on the board that I have here is the area outlined in green, which is the overlay zone. And then within that overlay, we also identified several parcels that this commission felt might be eligible for a transit-oriented development park, which essentially became an overlay to the overlay. And those are the parcels identified in yellow on that board. The Commerce Drive area regs, if you look at section 12, or 13.2, which outlines the permitted uses in the overlay, refers you back to what the underlying zone permits, either designed industrial or designed commercial. In the designed commercial regs, which is 12.4, which is the third exhibit, section 12.4.18 specifically talks about residential uses that are permitted in the underlying zone and makes reference to a transit-oriented development park. We think that should be changed to the Commerce Drive Area Design District, because when we changed the overlay to the overlay, we never changed the nomenclature in that draft reg. The omission is when we set up the transit-oriented development park, which is found in section 13.14 of your regs and on exhibit 2. We omitted the intended limit of 70% maximum residential percentage in a building within that overlay. Now, as I mentioned, the section 12.4.18 limit would not apply to section 13.14, since that section outlines its own permitted uses separately. It doesn't refer you back to the underlying zone, excuse me, like the previous section. So as currently written, section 13.14 does not have a limit to the maximum percentage of building within this overlay that can be occupied by residential use. We believe the presumption was that section 12.4.18 limit should be applied to the transit-oriented district overlay. So it does not. It does not now. So what our proposed amendment is to introduce that 70% maximum in section 13.14.4, which the reg currently permits a maximum allowable dwelling unit density of 50 bedrooms per acre. What we're suggesting is adding language, and residential use should not exceed 70% of the total area of the building. So again, in sum, the two changes are changing the reference name from Transit-Oriented Design District to Commerce Drive Area Overlay in section 12.4.18, and introducing that same limit of residential occupancy in section 13.14.4. This came to light during discussions with some prospective developers of a parcel when we went to go through these design requirements. And of course, the devil is always in the details. We're now going to actual implementation, and we discovered that omission. There are, and those folks are here this evening. You did receive some materials from them via email earlier, and they intend to speak on that subject tonight. As I said, there are other voices to be heard. You do have a memo, excuse me, by email from Mark Barnhart that came in today, suggesting that 20% would be a more appropriate percentage rather than the 30% that we are proposing. And similarly, you'll hear from a prospective applicant that thinks and is going to explain to you why that they think that that's an appropriate percentage as well. So unless there's any questions, that's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any members of the commission have any questions for Mr. Wendt before we go to public comment? Yes, Commissioner Corcoran. Use your mic.
How was the original 70-30 split determined?
Well, that's a good question. I went back to look at the previous drafts, and the reg in the design commercial district permits 50% max. Within this area, it was an increase from 50% to 70%. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion about what number would be the appropriate number. It just was, there was some thought that there ought to be a greater percentage than what we had previously permitted.
And is it also true that, I mean, what is the maximum number of stories that can be on these, in this district?
Well, we don't have it in the TOD overlay. It's a 60-foot limit. There's not a story height limit. It's a max of 60 feet, which would typically be 5 stories.
Yes, Commissioner Merritt.
Just want to ask Mr. Weinberg, just to give refresh people's memory about this, or people that weren't about, the Commerce Drive study was a result of about 2 to 3 years of work with a consultant, and it involved public input, correct?
It was a large effort. There was a lot of public outreach done, a lot of stakeholder meetings, several sessions of public input. We had a design charrette that was well attended by the public. So that whole planning effort, there was a great deal of public input and public outreach that resulted in the plan, the first paragraph of which I referred to earlier.
We had a charrette with about 50 or 60 people all putting together plans, and it was synthesized, and then over the course of time,
Yes.
We produced this. So I'm just, because it's still a few years ago. I remember these weren't like arbitrary numbers. People were talking about 6-story buildings or 7-story buildings.
Right.
And eventually we came to somehow, I can't remember how, 60 feet
Right.
is a maximum, and the 70-30. So I think Mr. Corcoran's question is good. It's like, what was behind that? I don't think it was arbitrary. So.
No, I wouldn't suggest that. I think there was, the consensus that was reached through that planning effort, I think, on a town basis, was that it was generally recognized that if we're going to have economic growth and increased development, this is the area of the town that is the most appropriate place for that to occur. And there were a lot of, as you say, the suggestions of allowance ranged well beyond the scope of parameters that this commission ultimately settled on. So there was, you're right, there were discussions for, heights well above what we settled on at 60 feet.
But the 70-30, like the 50-50, which is that's more easily to visualize the rationale behind it.
Right.
In our center district, it's 50-50. So you say, okay, we've got retail on the ground
Right.
floor, residential on top. There had to be, more rationale how we came up with 70-30 with the 60-foot. I was trying to
Yep.
get to what that might have been. Because we're looking to adopt that now and make that, just tighten up.
Right now, what the omission, as I said, we left out a cap when we applied the overlay. I think the intention there was this would be a mixed-use development, that it wouldn't be solely residential. And the regulations require that there be some element of commercial. We're just looking to carry that forward to a 30% percentage.
Right, sorry, that's why this is our application, I agree. I don't think it was ever anybody's intent to be solely residential, so I think, there was an omission there, but it was, as you said, and that's the reason
Right.
for this application, an omission. I don't think anybody intended it to be different, and I guess we kind of thought the words that it would work, and,
Sorry, go ahead, I can wait. Commissioner Jacobson.
Yeah, Mark Barnhart, the economic director, has said Mark Barnhart, the economic development, said that, he said 80-20 because if there was 5 floors, 20% would be the top floor, and then the other would be,
With the other way around, I think he was
That's
saying
what
that,
I-
the ground
yeah.
floor would be commercial and the other
commercial,
floors
the other
could be
floor.
residential.
Right. So if we had like a fourth, how would that be enforced? Is that a detriment? Like, we would just kind of approximate 70-30, or?
No, when an application is put before you, it would have to spell out exactly what the proposed uses are. So you wouldn't be, we're just laying the parameters of the regulation.
Okay.
An actual application would put that into
In square feet, it
implementation.
would have to be, okay.
Right.
Commissioner Calabrese?
Oh.
And just, again, following up on what Commissioner Barrett was saying, the two things in play here, one, the reference to the transit-oriented development park in 12.4.18.
Right.
It was intended to be a reference to Commerce Drive overlay in the first place, right? I mean,
Right. It refers to a prior title of the, we changed the title of the district in the second iteration of the draft and never changed it in 12.4.8.
So truly, you characterize that as a typographical error in the revision of the final
Yes,
draft.
or an editing error, yes.
And then in 13.4, in 13.4, in the document that you gave us here, I think that there's an extra period in 13.14.4. I mean, literally in the numbering.
You're correct, yes, that first, between, you're right, that the period between the 1 and the 3 should not be there.
Yeah, so maybe we can correct that in the final. And then, the last, the other issue, or the second issue presented, to carry forward the 70-30 split. I mean, it was the intention from the time that these were prepared that would be the limitation. This is not a new concept, right?
Right, the 70-30, the 70% maximum residential exists presently in section 12.
Right.
It's just that when we adopted the overlay, it separated that reference back to that section, so we never carried that language forward, and that's what we're proposing to do tonight.
Mr. Corcoran?
Okay, so, let me see if I understand this. You mentioned earlier that we have a proposal for a building in this district.
We don't have it, but we've been presented and had some discussions with some folks who are interested in developing it. And in going through our parameters of our regulations, it was discovered by them that we don't have the question was raised,
Right.
does that 70% limit apply to this overlay district or does it not? And the fact of the matter is, after reading it again and again, we concluded that it actually does not, but we intended it to do so.
So with this proposal, and I think it's an 80-20 one, sort of, as Mark Barnhart
Correct.
mentioned. So if we pass this, we're going to, in effect, cause the proposal to have to change to 70-30. Is that right?
Well, we can debate whether to make the proposal less restrictive by adopting an 80-20 split, if that's something we all think is appropriate, which is why we're going to hear,
Right.
public comment.
Whatever percentage this commission determines to be appropriate is the percentage that any prospective applicant would need to comply with.
So we're not just dealing with this specific amendment, we can add other amendments as well?
Well, no, and if we were to make the proposal more restrictive, then we would have to go out to another public hearing. We would, or if we had other or different amendments to the regulations, then those would need to be published, and there would need to be a public hearing
So
on those.
we're just talking right now of applying the 70-30 to the...
Right, the proposal at hand is to carry that 70-30 forward to the transit overlay.
Right.
I just want to go back and reiterate, we're talking about a finite number of parcels. Part of the plan and the planning discussion, am I right here, Jerry, with the mic, is that the intent in the parcels that are identified in yellow are those that are closest to the train station. The intent was for the redevelopment to happen first, closest in. And so that's why these parcels are fairly limited. And I also wanted to say, because I had a couple of calls about it, and I don't know if there's anybody here publicly concerned about it, this is not a Metro Center amendment. I want to make that clear. The Metro Center was approved under section 21.16 of our regs, which is the Transformation Commercial Park, which is a whole different set of criteria. While that parcel is identified as a potential candidate under this regulation, that would be a whole new ballgame for that. That development was approved under section 21.16 of our regulation, so this is not a Metro Center specific regulation. There was some inquiry internally to our office about that. I just want to make that clear for the record.
Thank you. That's a good, excellent clarification. Thank you. Did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Went. Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard on this item?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name's Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Frey and Bologna. We have offices at 1735 Post Road. I appreciate the opportunity to address the commission on this amendment. As outlined in the letter I submitted to the staff, who then conveyed to you, which was designed to give you a heads up of our concerns, I represent Scala Partners relative to the property at 665-711 Commerce Drive. That's the property which was formerly the site of Fitness Edge, presently vacant. These properties are located opposite the Sims Building in the southwesterly quadrant of the intersection of Black Rock Turnpike and Commerce Drive. These two properties, which have generally been utilized together, have a total of 2.6 acres. My client's intention is to propose a mixed-use project on that site, and to proceed under the overlay zone, the Transit-Oriented Development Park, the TODP. The proposal, and there's just a rough conceptual handout that you received, includes a 5-story building with retail and office primarily on the first floor and 4 stories of residential use above. The 4-story residential use would accommodate 102 apartments, some 1 bedroom, some 1 bedroom plus a den, some 2 bedrooms. As a result, the 5 stories is a split of 20% commercial, 80% residential. My client engaged experts in the field, including Tim Gooding from Gooding Architecture in Stanford, Redness and Mead from Stanford, do a lot of engineering and zoning work. They prepared a number of plans in an effort to conform to the proposed 70-30 split. We've just not been able to do so in an economically viable fashion, and you'll hear a little bit more on that issue from my client. I think it's also relevant to note that the difficulty financing mixed-use projects increase as the percentage of commercial use increases. I'd also like to point out that the TOPD does permit, as Mr. Wendt outlined, a 60-foot or a 5-story building. It's certainly the case that second floor retail and commercial use is really not a viable entity. It really doesn't work. These facts lead one to conclude that the optimal use allocation is 20% commercial, 80% residential. That is 1-story commercial and 4 stories residential. My clients and the landowner are anxious to proceed with this proposal. They and I believe it would be a real benefit for this specific area as well as for the town of Fairfield in general. It could be a template, if you will, for future development of this type in the area. It's our belief that the conceptual plan that was submitted satisfies all the relevant zoning criteria except for the proposed 70% residential requirement. Certainly this area is within walking distance of the railroad station, and I submit it fits perfectly with what the TOPD is trying to do. The fact is that the proposed amendment here, which was an issue raised by my client, just doesn't, in our opinion, work in this district. We're proposing that the 70% residential requirement be changed to an 80% residential figure. My clients are here with me tonight. The principals of Scala Partners are Ari Kudavides and his brother Nico Kudavides. I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I have one. So, there was a significant amount of, as we talked about earlier, significant amount of effort that went into this over many years. I participated in quite a few years of planning on this. Were your clients involved in any way in that? And I appreciate the concern, the study, the effort that you're presenting and that your clients are presenting, and it's all very viable. I'm just curious as to whether there was this was on the radar, because when we went through the process, as Mr. Wendt suggested, clearly there needed to be a difference. We clearly were trying to incent mixed use and commercial on the ground level and residential above, and 70-30 was the split that resulted. Any Was there any, was that on the radar at the time?
My clients are not Fairfielders. You can hear from them how they came to the town of Fairfield and became interested in this piece of property. But the fact of the matter is, they didn't participate. They're from Simsbury. They didn't participate in that process at all. And, you know, my point is not to say there's anything wrong necessarily with the process or with the 70-30.
Right.
It's just that sometimes these details come to the fore when you've got a practical application for a practical piece of property and a proposed use.
Right.
That's really the reason we're here.
And truth be told, you know, this was in the works for many years, and it was passed, as you said, you know, a couple of years ago, and this is the first application.
That's
You
true.
know, and so it's really the first time that this is being looked at on a practical level, so,
Understood.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard on this item?
Good evening. My name is Ari Kudavides. I represent Scholar Partners. I'm here as a principal. Thank you, Bill, for your comments, and I just wanted to give a little bit of insight. You know, we've spent a lot of time and effort over the last 3 or 4 months working with the staff pretty closely about you know, this overlay zone and how to practically apply it in practice. We can appreciate that this is the first time that the city, the commission, and the staff is going through this process. So we understand that when there is a new zoning regulation that you're trying to apply practically for the first time, it you know, there's fits and starts, and you take a step forward and a couple steps back, and that's how you get through it. So we can appreciate that. I just wanted to you know, say a couple of words about our company and the types of opportunities we look for. My brother and I both live in Connecticut. I live in Stamford, and my brother Nico lives in Avon. We set forth to start a company focused on really bringing you know, a modern day kind of housing to a lot of the town centers in Connecticut, which we feel lack you know, that type of product. We feel people want to be in their town centers, they want to be in commercial districts and near their retail, and really not, there hasn't been much development of that type over the years in Connecticut, and we feel like we're at the forefront of having helped that change in the state. So when we learned about this development district, we grew very excited, and we wanted to commend the staff and the commission for a number of what I'll call very pro-development, mixed-use kind of concepts that were approved in the zoning. Namely, you know, that it is requiring multiple uses, which we think is very positive. The fact that you're allowing up to 80% coverage, which is, I mean, extremely pro-development, and really is only seen in many towns in industrial zones, and so we commend you for that. Obviously, the 60 feet in height is very positive, and even the parking regulations are very, very reasonable. The 1.25 per dwelling unit, and also you know, the requirements around commercial and retail are all very positive. With that, and as we started off, we obviously hired our design team, as Bill noted, to go out and, you know, put a building on this parcel that fits the box that is allowed under the zone. And when we went out and did that, we were able to quite easily meet all of the regulations from our perspective, and I think, you know, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the staff, but I think the staff would agree that essentially all of them are met, other than the 30% requirement. And when we tried to design around that, what ended up happening was, you know, a couple of things. It created a project design-wise that potentially would be less marketable. As Bill noted, moving, you know, retail to the second floor or trying to create a bigger base in the building would take away, essentially would be adding square footage that we would have to park, and then we couldn't meet the parking requirement. So, you know, from that perspective, it would make the property more difficult to, you know, practically, go ahead.
No, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
before you moved on to the next
Yeah.
point, I just wanted to so can you just talk about that for a moment? Because I could easily envision, you know, a slightly larger base.
Right.
With a cone, right, in the center, you know, and so you've got 30% and 70%. How does that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what would happen is, right now, the way our concept plan works is essentially we can park all of the residential, all of the commercial and/or retail, and meet the parking requirement on the project plan. So as you start to make the base of the building bigger, you would be taking away surface parking area. And not only that, so you're taking away parking spaces, but you're also adding square footage, commercial square footage, and you would have to then park that square footage as well. So you're essentially digging yourself a deeper hole on the parking side. So what would actually happen, practically speaking, is that you would have to move to some sort of structured garage to park the property. And when you look at the neighborhood, and what we want to do is stay within, you know, the design to stay within harmony of the neighborhood, there really aren't other buildings that have structured parking, you know, in their buildings. So you have office buildings all around and a retail center there, and really all of them are parking kind of within the lot itself. So we didn't think that would be a desirable design outcome, and for the property and for the design of the building, and we didn't think it fit in well with the neighborhood. So in trying to keep in tying with the neighborhood, we felt like going with this type of design would be much more cohesive with what's there today. And so the zoning regs actually allow to build a much larger building. Right now, the building's about 120,000 square feet the way it's designed. But we could actually build up to, I believe it's over 150,000 square feet. So there is 30,000 more square feet of FAR that's actually allowed practically under the zone. But you have to still park that, and that's where it becomes difficult. And so you can increase density, but then you have to practically park that in some sort of structured garage, which we didn't think was as attractive. So all we're saying is consider that I think you should take that into consideration, because, you know, as a developer that maybe wants to just come in and do a project, not necessarily the right project that fits in that neighborhood, you know, the zoning regs as they're allowed today would permit you to do that, and you could, because you would have less flexibility.
So you're talking about parking all of the square footage on the surface then?
Correct.
And did you consider underground, under the building, some parking under the building?
I mean, well, then, this isn't in a wetlands.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, no.
It just occurs to me
yes.
as an alternative that, you know, you could have some surface and some
Yes.
underneath it.
Yeah, you would look at that, but again, that starts to, it's actually my third point, but we're
Sorry.
skipping, that's okay. It starts to become a less financeable, less economic project. It becomes more expensive, it becomes less practical, and so you're not necessarily generating a lot more revenue associated with that additional square footage, but you're adding a lot more cost, a lot more complication to the project. And as we become more complicated and more expensive, it becomes less financeable, less economic. And so those are the trade-offs you're having. It's not necessarily that it can't be done. It's just more, you know, we're trying to put something forth that is both practical, economic, and financeable, and also marketable.
And then the last question that I had is whether you think that these concerns and the aspects that you're having on this parcel are also attributable to the other parcels. This is not just about your parcel, but it applies across the other parcels as well.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think the commission should consider my example that I supplied, because I think you could, as you noted, make the base bigger, and then, you know, there's nothing that stops you from doing some either underground parking or structured parking and stuff like that. So, and then it becomes a design issue, right? Does that really look good? You know, can we hide that? Can we, does that building, is that something that's appropriate for the neighborhood? And our view is that this is the first time this zone is being used. We want to stay kind of harmonious with what's in that zone today. And so we wanted to be a little bit more thoughtful about how we designed this building, and we felt like this was more appropriate than kind of doing, you know, kind of a monster mega project with a big structured parking garage, which the zone allows for, but we just don't think is as nice a building and doesn't fit as well in that neighborhood. So really, those were my my points. I know we kind of skipped around a little bit. Thank you for the questions, and you know, we just want to say that we're very excited to work with the town. Again, we wanted to reiterate and commend you for the regulation in Section 13. We think it's very conducive to development, and we'd be very you know, excited about moving forward with a project in town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No. Yes. Are there any other members of the public that wish to be heard on this item?
My name's Tim Donahue, for the record. I'm one of the owners of the property, and I'm here tonight representing the 4 families that own the property for many years, and we're proud to represent that this is a great use for the property and a quality applicant that the town and the owners will be proud of over time.
Thank you. Question for staff?
Do we know how many lots we're talking about that this applies to?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's difficult to see from this distance. I'm gonna bring this a little closer to you so you can see it. But I'll just go through the parcel. This parcel here is currently a 5-story office building at the corner of Kings Highway, cut off in Kings Highway. It's across the street from Staples Plaza. This is Staples Plaza. The next parcel that we've identified is the former Sims property. So that's 3. These parcels, there's 3 here, one of which is the newly opened daycare facility. There's a restaurant existing on this corner here, and there's still a lab on this corner. So then the other parcels are the parcel we're talking about this evening that these gentlemen are interested in. And then these 2 parcels are existing office building parcels. And then we've identified the Metro Center parcel as eligible, but it would have to be under the scheme of a completely different development proposal. So, all told, about 15 parcels.
The reason I ask, I mean, we have a 70-30 law now. We have a 70-30 regulation now. And maybe going 80-20. By that, you know, this applicant or future applicant saying, you know what, at 70-30 it doesn't work, I need that extra floor of residential to make it viable. Am I right? That's what we're talking about. I mean, in the next couple of years, how many extra floors are we going to be, or square footage are we looking at? Because this applicant can't make it work. How many more apartments are we going to be looking at in the future for that 10%?
That's a good question. I have a twofold response to that. I think clearly some of these parcels are not likely to be redeveloped in the near term. They've got existing fairly, you know, buildings that are still have a lot of useful lifespan left and are tenant filled. There are a smaller number of parcels that are what I would say ripe for development, or soft parcels as we identified them in our plan, this being one of them. So I can't give you a hard number, but I'll respond this way. Anything that gets built at any point in time is really a reflection of the current marketplace that it's in. Right now, you know, obviously the Metro Center is idle.
There really isn't a market for office space right now. I don't expect that to be the case forever. So in the near term, I think, there's more of a market for residential than there is for office. I wouldn't expect that to be the case, like I said, forever. So my own personal opinion is I would advocate for flexibility, so that as the market changes, I would expect that if there's a stronger market for office space, you're going to see applications that have a greater percentage of commercial than residential.
60/40.
Whatever that may be, less than, the maximums that we're talking about. But in the near term, that market does not exist. So we're in a marketplace now that obviously nothing's happening here. And there is some market, as we've seen in some applications, for residential. Now, that residential in near a train station is something that we're advocating for in the plan. We're just talking about, the percentage mix. I would expect in the longer term, when there's more of a stronger commercial market, that you're going to, like I said before, that's going to shift, and you'll see applications that are going to have a much higher percentage of commercial than residential. So it's hard to say, snapshot view, how many units you're talking about in total build-out, because the market hopefully is going to change over time, and that we will see a stronger commercial marketplace return, and that, those projects that happen in the short term will be, complementary to those other projects in the longer term that are more commercially percentage.
And the significant thing is that we're not mandating a specific split, right? These are minimums and maximums.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So, as I said, I think what we want to try to strive for is flexibility, so as things change, we're not constantly changing, changing the parameters of our regulations. Now, whether 20%, 30% is significant, obviously you've heard some discussion about that today, but I would, like I said, 10 years from now, I would hope that the reverse would be true, and that we're going to see some stronger office space, and perhaps, creating some residential units in the near term might attract commercial development, in the long term.
And we wouldn't have to change the regulations again if there's an increase in commercial on the application, because these are minimums and maximums.
Exactly.
Increase the maximum residential. So it could be the case that if the regulations were passed at 80/20, that the maximum residential would be 80% in future builds.
Right.
The maximum.
I'm saying, what is the town overall population change based on that 10% basically lots that we're talking about? That was the question basically.
Yeah, but like I said, I would not expect over the lifespan of the buildings within this finite area that we've defined, that are all going to change, that's going to be a longer generational turnover, that towards, the latter end of that, it's going to be a stronger, the hope is that it'd be a stronger commercial market at that point than residential.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. White.
Sure.
For the record, Joe Novacek, Planning Director. Along what Jim was saying also about the intent, the general intent that we went through with this, two things. One is the reason for a percentage is because the base of this area was commercial, and we're going through a transition now, and because of the train station, which is basically drove the bus for this whole discussion, residential mix was important and necessary. The percentage, 20 or 30, to me, really isn't a big deal. What it really comes down to is you need some just to maintain some commercial integrity, but 20 or 30 really, I don't think, is a big deal, reducing it that. The other part of it, though, which has already been mentioned a little bit, is what you want in the first development is something that sets a standard. And really what you're looking at, the 20, 30, that to me is important, that there's something. But what's more important is that you want a quality development there. And what you're going to really look at is really how this thing, the design's going to fit. And it goes along what was discussed about the structured parking, or making the underground issue, making it more complicated with development. What you really want to do here, and what you would do on this, and why this
piece of property is fantastic. It's in the middle of this area, which is a relatively small area, could grow sometime in the future, long future. But really what you want is a quality development here to set the standard, so you can point to something, say, this is what the regs permitted, this is what we intended, and it does set a standard for whoever else comes to develop under those regulations. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to be heard on this item? No? Attorney Fitzpatrick?
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
All right, very good. I'll close the hearing on this item. The next item on our agenda is 5151 Park Avenue, special exception application of Sacred Heart University pertaining to the construction of a new radio station and public safety building. I understand that we need to take a moment to set up some AV equipment, so I'll adjourn for 5 minutes. Yeah. Right? Okay. Call the hearing back to order. Last item on our agenda, 5151 Park Avenue. Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Frey & Bologna. Offices at 1735 Post Road. I'm here this evening representing Sacred Heart University, which is, as you know, located at the intersection of Park Avenue and Jefferson Street. The university campus contains approximately 56 acres and is located in the Residence R3 zoning district. Your zoning regulations for the R3 district include a university as a permitted use via special exception approval. The application before you tonight requests special exception approval pursuant to Section 27 of the regulations for the construction of the WSHU public safety building in the southeasterly corner of the campus, and a Section 24 special permit since the proposed net cut exceeds 250 cubic yards. The WSHU/public safety building is essentially on the site of an existing semi-residential structure that formerly served as the university's health center, and a new health and wellness center has been constructed across the street in Bridgeport on Park Avenue, and that existing building will be demolished. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Jacob Higginbottom, an architect at the firm of Spagnola Gisnes Architecture LLC, with offices in Boston, Mass. Jacob.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for the opportunity to present this project this evening. Speaking on behalf of Sacred Heart University, my name is Jacob Higginbottom. I'm an architect with Spagnola Gisnes and Associates Architects out of Boston. We're happy to be retained on behalf of Sacred Heart University. You'll see behind you, I'm going to step the board through, the commission through the general location, landscape plans, building elevations, and site plans. You can see this is an overall location plan of the entire university. As Bill mentioned, the site in question is in the southeast corner down here, where the original currently houses about a 2,500 square foot Park Avenue house, the former Health and Wellness Center, which has been relocated across Park Avenue and is now vacant. That parcel would be demolished and would house a proposed new radio station building being relocated from their current location in this location, and as well combining a small portion of the public safety program in the admin building, which will be backfilled with program for the Performing Arts Center. The proposed building, actually, this is a zoomed-in plan of the location and the existing Park Avenue house to be removed. The proposed building sits on axis with a connection to the Ron Colley Hall across the, or there's a pedestrian connection to Ron Colley Hall here, which we're not proposing to change. And the building sits in a rectangular fashion here on Park Avenue with the proper setbacks. I'll get into some of the landscape materials at a later date. Let's see. This landscape plan illustrates a small parking lot to be constructed at the building, providing the minimum handicap spaces. Mr. Fitzpatrick can speak to the parking strategy. The building sits on a very steep slope. We're proposing a scored concrete plaza in front of the building, a set of stairs that continue what is now an existing pedestrian connection from the other university functions across Park Avenue, that would come down to a lower plaza and then subsequently down a graded walkway towards the administration building and some other desire lines for students. We're proposing university standard pole lamps for wayfinding and general safety, and there are a few step lights along the way down these stairs as they descend towards the campus. The lower plaza is the entrance to the public safety office. The upper plaza is the entrance to the radio station component. I'll just step the commission quickly through the floor plans, starting at the Park Avenue level, which we call level 2. The main entrance to the building is off of the plaza you saw here, through a vestibule to a reception area. The radio station program houses a series of broadcast studios for the different frequencies that they transmit. Some administrative and engineering space, back of house workstations, news, media workstations, and what is called a community room, which houses a multi-function space of various components throughout the year. There's also a fairly substantial network operations center as part of this, as well as full 24/7 emergency backup, as both components require that, both public safety and the radio station. This is what we call level 2. Going up to level 3. Level 3 is served via 2 means of egress, stairs, and an elevator. This level is primarily office space and workstations, toilets. The rooftop units for the building are located on a lower roof, which is at the level of level 3. So this roof can be accessed from this location. It's on the same level as level 3. And those are hidden from view by a aluminum roof screening element. They won't be visible from Park Avenue, but that screen is to prohibit sight lines from within the campus.
What are those 2 dark green areas?
I'm sorry?
Those 2 dark green areas?
This is a programmatic diagram illustrating that these are, that's a conference room and a mail room. And the rest of these are offices of development and growth, general manager, engineering workstations.
What's the reason for the talk of
It's proposed that there will be approximately 850 square foot opportunity for roof activation in temperate weather on the lower roof towards the campus side of the building. On the lowest level of the building, which we call level 1, as I illustrated before, the main entrance to public safety is from the lower plaza through this vestibule. Public safety takes up the yellow portion of this floor plan. they're primarily offices and a conference and briefing command center, kitchenette, bike storage, which is accessed. SHU has a growing population of bike patrol. So they can store bikes in here. There's some video and interview rooms. There's one office for on-campus Fairfield police presence. And the back of house in the basement houses some storage for the radio station on the upper levels, as well as the main infrastructure for the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, fire protection. The building construction type is type 2C. It's steel frame with a masonry veneer. And I can step you through the elevations of the building quickly. Start with the front elevation. The top elevation on this illustration is the Park Avenue elevation. As I mentioned before, this is masonry with a storefront window system, non-reflective glazing. The entrance to the building has a curtain wall expression which rises above the roof by about 2 feet. The average, we've performed the average grade calculations and the girth calculations for the project, and the building is at 33'7" above average grade. The walls that you're seeing here are retaining walls that will be built for the new parking that cascade down the hill. You can see there's a fairly dramatic slope. We've used some different tones of masonry to express the different volumes. There's a vertical connector component here which connects for handicap accessibility. The elevator is located towards the front of the reception space, so if there was a need to get a student from this upper level to the lower level, they could come in, go down the elevator, and come out on the lower plaza. And this is expressed with a slightly darker masonry color. The community room has a presence in the volume with a kind of a brown warm masonry and a larger glazed expression here. It's primarily brick. And brick veneer, yep. Brick veneer on metal stud backup. The building derives its vocabulary from some of the other buildings on campus. It's a mix of contemporary volumes and traditional materials to relate to the buildings at the admin building, as well as some of the other buildings just up the road. There is a satellite dish located on the ground in the back of the radio station, hidden from view at the lower level. The south elevation is generally the back of the building, which faces the golf course to the south. And we have one last illustration, which is here on this board as well, rendering approaching the building from Park Avenue, driving south. You can see the expression of the entry in glass, the punched openings in the radio station component, and the community room here, as well as the vertical circulation element. Public safety is hidden from view. It's on the lowest level and faces the academic complex where it currently exists. With that, I will wrap up the architectural description. Pass this back to Mr. Fitzpatrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Mr. Chairman, I'd now like to introduce Mr. Manuel J. Silva, a professional engineer with the firm of Rose Tizo with offices in Fairfield.
is Manny Silva from Rose Tizo and Company of 35 Brentwood Avenue in Fairfield. I'm civil engineer, licensed in the state of Connecticut. I'm going to walk through the site plans really quick, even though my colleague Jacob went through them on the projector there. Essentially, the existing health and wellness that is now vacant building is here. The building was essentially a converted residence with some pavement areas around the building where they had the existing parking. As you can see, currently there's also a access way from the Park Avenue crossing from the Roncalli building. What we are proposing is essentially taking down that residential type building, which is surrounded by the south parking lot of Sacred Heart University near the academic building. Essentially, we're going to, this building is going to go in right in the place of the old residential, which was converted to commercial use building. There is an upper plaza with some handicap spaces here to facilitate anyone that needs accessible parking and needs to go to the radio station on this level. Essentially, we're going to continue the theme on Park Avenue with the fencing along Park Avenue, that black fencing with the masonry pillars. We're going to continue that across to this driveway, and then from this point on, in front of the wheel or the Wheeler golf course, there's a big stone wall, and essentially we're going to extend that stone wall element to make it similar, because there's a pier and a stone wall right here at the entrance of the golf course. So we want to extend that towards in front of our building also, and then have that transition to the Sacred Hearts type of fencing, which is that wrought iron fence with the pillars. Like I said, just basic site plan. You have some additional parking, the two levels that the architect really went through. As far as drainage, oops, wow.
What is there now? What's there currently now? Is that quantified from by professional woodline?
Currently here, right here.
Fence in there? Yeah.
Currently, there's a stone wall that ends right here, more or less, right here, near the existing. I think there's a sidewalk that goes to the front of the building.
So it's kind of open to get to the campus from that side there? Yeah. So you can pretty much get into campus from there now?
Correct. Correct. Right now, there's a sidewalk that goes along Park Avenue to the east, and the signalized crossing is right here at the top of the hill on Park Avenue, and you walk down a paved, like a wide paved walkway down the hill onto campus. Okay. I'm going to apologize about the next page. I didn't realize that my printer splattered toner all over it. Essentially, the drainage system, we're complying with the town's drainage requirements. We're picking up some of this flow minor flow that's here at the handicap spaces, and then what's coming off of the building to a series of catch basins, and then into concrete galleries underground, which will then infiltrate the water into the ground. And then we'll connect that into a control structure, which is linked to an existing pipe that comes down to a retention pond. So basically, we're adding a control. We're controlling our stormwater on this site, and then that minimal discharge that's coming off of this site will then go on to another controlled stormwater facility, which is the pond near the corner right here, bordering the golf course. Essentially, we are reducing the discharge from this site for the 2-year storm at 33%, the 5-year storm at 45%. We're reducing the 10-year storm by 50%, the 25 years by 55%, the 50-year storm by 34%, and the 100-year storm by 4%. So essentially, and we also meet the water quality volume, which is mandated by the DEP and their stormwater guidelines. We exceed the water quality volume required from the DEP. I just wanted to get into, there was only two small comments from your engineering department. One was to require cleanouts for the concrete galleries, which I show on this plan. We happily will comply with that. And also to hood the catch basins. I'll skip ahead to C14, where we'll comply with the engineering's requirement or comment to add hoods to the catch basin to catch floatables inside the actual catch basin, and that go into the gallery system. So basically, the site drops off from Park Avenue down to the south parking lot. That's the need. This is why we have these stairs and basically the tiered plazas. So now students, instead of coming down a steep ramp where they have a wide, essentially about, I'd say it's about 12 to 15 feet wide, going down the slope, we're going to have essentially a tiered plaza with some illuminated steps coming down to that area, and then also a handicapped accessible elevator which comes at the entrance of the SHU building and then exits out the securities building down below. Our sanitary sewer connection is going to be via an extension across the south parking lot to an existing manhole that's out in front of the academic building, which is all on our site. Essentially, we're just connecting a new lateral to an existing sewer system on site, which goes out to Bridgeport. We have our soil and erosion control plan. Again, basically, we're just putting silt fence around the whole site. We have our anti-tracking pad entering the site so we don't mud track out into Park Avenue. And we put silt sacks around all our basins to protect that, any kind of construction debris from getting into the basins that we've already put in and not getting downstream into the ponds or into the waterway that crosses the golf course. All our new sidewalks and ramps will have the required detectable pads for the sight impaired. And again, here's our the snouts or the hoods for the catch basins. Essentially, some general details. Again, silt fence, how we put in the silt fence, and then our integrated concrete walks in any manhole details. I think that's basically it. If you have any questions for me, I would be happy to answer them. I think that pretty much covers it. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Turn it back over to Attorney Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Manny. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'd now like to sum up, conclude this presentation, making specific reference to Section 27 of the zoning regulations. This application was reviewed by the Conservation Department. It was decided no formal inland wetland application or public hearing was necessary, and administrative approval has been issued. Proposal was reviewed at a code enforcement meeting. All relevant suggestions were incorporated into the plans. The drainage report has been made available to the Town of Fairfield Engineering Department, and Laura Pulley of the Engineering Department has approved the plans, subject to the two minor conditions that Mr. Silva has indicated the university will comply with. The WSHU Public Safety Building as proposed, we feel, fully satisfies the relevant zoning regulations. Plans confirm that all relevant requirements are satisfied, including coverage and floor area. The plans include grade calculations, which together with the elevations confirm the building satisfied the height requirements, as you heard from Mr. Higginbottom. Cut and fill calculations are included in the plans. For the record, the net cut is 1,852 cubic yards. The relevant factors for consideration by the Commission in reviewing a special exception are outlined in Section 27.4 of the zoning regulations. For Section 27.4.1 notes that the proposal shall be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the town and neighborhood and not discourage appropriate development and use of adjacent property. I'd submit on this issue, the issue of harmony with the town and neighborhood has essentially already been settled. Use of this property by Sacred Heart is decades old and has been recognized by your commission in the Town Plan of Conservation and Development. I think it's also incontrovertible that the proposed uses for this building, SHU, WSHU offices and public safety offices, are integral components of the university use. The second part of section 27.4.1, that the proposed use not hinder or discourage appropriate development or use of adjacent property, is again satisfied here by the fact the university use has essentially existed since 1963, and I think it's self-evident that the addition of this building is devoid of any impact on the appropriate development and use of adjacent property. 27.4.2 is satisfied because there is adequate access for fire protection. Again, this plan was specifically reviewed by the fire marshal as part of the code review process. The provisions of 27.4.3 relate to traffic. I'd like to submit a letter report. I apologize for the tardy submission. You can see it's dated February 14th, so it's not new news. The point of the report is that the WSHU, let me rephrase that, the public safety component already exists on campus. The WSHU component already exists on campus. There's a small portion of WSHU which is located off campus. That is approximately 9 or 10 employees, which are over in Trumbull on Oakview. Those people will be coming to campus, so we are talking about, from a traffic perspective, the addition of 9 or 10 employees, and Mr. Galante's letter concludes that from a traffic perspective, the relocation of the WSHU public safety uses on campus will not have an impact on the overall operation of internal vehicular activities and will not have an impact on the adjacent roadways with respect to operations, traffic levels, or a need for mitigation. As such, there is no undue hazard to traffic or congestion. I might also point out that when the existing WSHU building comes down, there will be approximately 40 additional parking spaces there. Section 27.4.4 discusses landscaping. You've seen the landscaping that we've proposed here. 27.4.5 is satisfied since the presence of the university is acknowledged in the Town Plan of Conservation and Development adopted by the Commission in the year 2000, and the proposed building will have no discernible impact on any residential neighbor. In closing, I'd just like to emphasize that the radio station, WSHU, is a national public radio member, reaching an audience in Fairfield and New Haven counties, in Connecticut, and in Suffolk County in New York. It offers news, local reporting, cultural programming, and classical music. It is the 34th most popular NPR station in the nation out of 340 NPR stations. As such, top 10%. This building will provide needed space for WSHU to continue its valuable work in a much more efficient, usable space. Similarly, the Department of Public Safety is somewhat cramped in its present location in the academic building. Department of Public Safety will now have an office, conference room, dispatch center, and lockers. I think it's also important to note there's a proposal here to include an office for the Town of Fairfield Police Department to use as a substation, and there's also the possibility of increased use in the future. For the reasons I've outlined, I'd request this application be approved. We believe it complies with the relevant zoning regulations. The architect, Mr. Silva, and I, as well as representatives of the university, would be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you, Attorney Fitzpatrick. Does any member of the commission have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Francis?
How many
Use the
employees will
microphone.
be in this building during the day? This new building?
The radio station has a total of approximately 25 to 27 employees. They work a 24-hour, 7-day work schedule. Public safety currently has approximately 51 employees on 3 shifts. So that our estimate is that the maximum on campus at in the building on any one time would be about 40 people between WSHU and public safety.
And is there enough parking? Enough parking for all those people who are coming from
Can you-
over here?
Can you push the microphone in front of her?
The fact of the matter is that when WSHU's building comes down on the other side of campus, it opens
Right.
up 40 parking spaces.
Over there,
So well, they're gonna have to move from one to the other, is the fact of the matter. I think, I don't know what's the most popular parking with the students, but students will find their way to the available spaces. We're certainly no worse off than at present. We expect to be better off.
Are students allowed to park in this lot adjoining?
I think
the new
that's the
building?
faculty lot, so
I would think so.
I think
It
that's,
would be staff.
and that will work as employees for WSHU and public safety as well.
Are students allowed in this lot out on Park Avenue, the long one?
No.
It's all staff?
Staff.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other member of the commission have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? No? All right.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, then I'll close the hearing. That's the last item on our agenda. This meeting is adjourned.